Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun.
Welcome to our Bhakti Shastri online course. Today's lesson will be beginning the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and we'll cover the first 12 verses of the 7th chapter. In discussing the 7th chapter in 1972, in a lecture, Srila Prabhupada explained that the Bhagavad Gita is divided into 3 portions: the first 6 chapters, the second 6 chapters, and the third 6 chapters. Actually, just like this book, there are 2 hardcovers, and in the middle there is the substance, writing. So the first 6 chapters, they are just like 2 coverings, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. And the middle 6 chapters, well protected, that is Bhakti Yoga. In his purport to text number 28 of the 8th chapter, Srila Prabhupada reiterates the same point. Chapters 7 through 12 are the essence of Bhagavad Gita. The first 6 and the last 6 chapters are like coverings for the middle 6 chapters, which are especially protected by the Lord. So as we progress through chapters 7, 8, 9, and particularly in chapter 9, which is called the Rajaguhya Yoga, we'll see very confidential subject matters pertinent to Bhakti Yoga, how the Lord reciprocates with the Bhakta Yogi, and the confidential subject matters which are contained there. And in this way we can see that these confidential subjects are protected by the first 6 chapters dealing with Karma Yoga and the last 6 chapters dealing with Jnana Yoga. At the conclusion of the 6th chapter, Shri Krishna explains, Yoginam api shadavesham madgaten anta atmana Shadhavan bhajate jomam same juktatamo mataha. Of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, he is the most intimately united with me in jog and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So Krishna is explaining that Madgatena means that anta atmana, Madgatena anta atmana, that deep within the heart, one follows Krishna's instructions, one abides by Krishna, one thinks of Krishna. So this is the beginning of Bhakti Yoga being explained by Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, and this concept is immediately carried on in the beginning of the 7th chapter when he begins to explain in detail how one abides by him, how one constantly thinks of him. So Krishna begins the 7th chapter as follows: Shri Bhagavan Vacha Maya Shaktamanar Pathar Jogam Junjan Madasrayaha Ashangshayam Shamagram Mam Jata Gyashashi Tatshrinu. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Now hear, O son of Pritha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. Jata Gyashashi Tatshrinu. Jata means how is it? Gyashashi, you should know. Tat Shrinu, just here. Prabhupada translates, now hear, O son of Pritha. Now hear, O son of Pritha, how one can constantly fix his mind upon the Lord. Also, this can be understood as just here, how it is possible, and also we could understand the meaning of this line as just by hearing it is possible. Yata Gyashashi Tat Shrinu. And this can be practiced, this can be known just by hearing. So when we see actually an analysis of the statistical analysis of the number of verses that are spoken by Sri Krishna and Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, we can see that particularly in the earlier chapters, Arjuna is speaking quite extensively, and Sanjaya also. However, when we reach chapter 7, Sri Krishna himself entirely speaks the chapter. And similarly, chapter 8, Arjuna, simply in the beginning of chapter 8, Arjuna asks a few questions for clarification. of what was stated at the end of chapter 7. And then Krishna carries on. And then similarly, chapter 9, Krishna exclusively speaks the whole chapter. So particular, right up to the Chatusloki Gita, midway through the 10th chapter, Krishna is virtually inundating Arjuna with transcendental wisdom, and Arjuna is simply listening attentively. Prabhupada concludes in his purport to first verse of the 7th chapter. One should therefore begin yoga practice as directed in the last verse of the 6th chapter. Concentration of the mind upon Krishna, the Supreme, is made possible by prescribed devotional service in 9 different forms, of which Shravanam is the first and most important. The Lord therefore says to Arjuna, Tat Shrinu, or hear from me. Ashankshayam shamagram mam. One can know me in full, free from doubt. In the purport to the 2nd verse, Prabhupada explains the significance of this statement. By practice of Krishna consciousness, one can know everything in full, namely the absolute truth, the living entities, the material nature, and their manifestations with paraphernalia. Text number 3, Krishna explains, Manushyanam shahasreshu kashchid yaditi siddhaye yatatam abhisidhanam kashchim mam betitattvataha. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. Oftentimes, this verse may be misquoted, even amongst the association of devotees, in regard difficulties faced by devotees in practicing Krishna consciousness and advancing in Krishna consciousness and really realizing Krishna. However, the verse is not intended to be understood in that way. We can understand because in this chapter, Krishna is explaining Bhakti Yoga and the simplicity of Bhakti Yoga. That even, as Prabhupada will explain in lecturing on these verses a little later, that even by drinking wine we can think of Krishna. So it's very easy to remember Krishna, and Krishna will explain how that can be done in the subsequent verses. So what he's referring to here is the yatatam apisidhanam, even those who have attained perfection. Amongst those, so Krishna is explaining, he's referring to the impersonalist yogis, and as he explained at the end of the 6th chapter, yoginam api sarvesham, all the different types of yogis, karma yogis, jnana yogis, ashtanga yogis, dhyana yogis. So yatatam api siddhanam, even one may have attained perfection in one of these various yoga paths, that does not is not sufficient kashchit mam vetitatvata, to understand Krishna, compared to the practice of bhakti, in which Krishna can be very easily understood. As Prabhupada comments in his purport to text 3, it's not possible for the Brahman realized impersonalist or the Paramatma realized yogi to understand Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the son of Mother Jasoda or the charioteer of Arjuna. So kashchit mam veditatvataha, this can only be understood by hearing about Krishna from him directly and by hearing about him from his devotee. Yatadam api siddhanam, out of many such perfect persons. Kashchit jan, kashchit mam veditatvataha, knows God. So God knowing is not a very easy job, but it can be made easy by a process which is called bhakti yoga. In the subsequent verses, 4 to 12 of the 7th chapter, Krishna explains how he is the source of both spiritual and material energies, and thus by hearing these detailed description of Krishna, it can become very easy for us to maya shakta mana, constantly fix our mind upon him. Krishna explains in text number 4, Bhumiyad apo nalo vayuru kammano bhu evacha ahankara iti yame bina prakrita ashtada, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether these constitute my 8 separated material energies. So this is bina prakriti astada. Bina prakriti means the separated material energies. How they are considered separated is that they are different from the internal energy of the Lord, which is eternally manifest in his divine eternal opulence, antaranga shakti. Krishna goes on to explain in text number 5, aparayamitas tanyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhuta mahabaho yaidam daryate jagat. Besides these, in other words, besides the apara prakriti, the material energy, aparayamitas tanyam, there is another Prakritim, energy of mine, Arjuna, which you should understand. Prakritim Vidime Param, which is my superior energy. Jiva Bhuta Mahabaho, this comprises of the living entities, Yayadam Dharyate Jagat, who are exploiting the resources of the material nature. In this way, Krishna goes on to explain in the next verse that Etad Yonini Bhutani Sarvaniti Upadharya Aham Kritsnasya Jagata Prabhava Pralayastata, that all created beings, either material or spiritual, have their source in these two natures. Everything that we see in this world is a combination of both the spirit soul, animating force, and the material energy, which is incarcerating the living entity. Everything is a combination of these two energies. All that is material and all that is spiritual in this world know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. So in this way, Krishna is explaining that by interacting with this material world and our perception of this material world, we can see this in terms of Krishna consciousness, and in this way, Maya Shaktamana, fix our mind upon him, Madashraya, take shelter of him, and in this way practice Bhakti Jog. Mata parataram nannat kinchidasti dhananjaya, Mayi sarvamidam protam sutre maniganaiva. A conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. The nature of this material world is that we just see the pearls, we see the material energy, and we consider that to be independent, not recognizing the underlying force and source of the material energy, Sri Krishna, who is somewhat hidden by the material nature, just like the thread is hidden by the pearls. Krishna now goes on to explain very specific manifestations of his opulence and energy. Rashoham apsukunteya, I am the taste of water. Prabhashmi shashishuraya, the light of the sun and the moon. Pranava sarvavedeshu, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantra. Shabdake, the sound in ether. Purusham rishu, and the ability in man. Punyaganda prithivyam cha, I am the original fragrance of the earth. Tejas chashmi vibhabishu, I am the heat of fire. Jivanam sarvabhuteshu, the life of all that lives. Tapash chashmi tapashvishu, I am the penances of all aesthetics. Bijam mam sarvabhutanam, the original seed of all existence. Vidiparta sanatanam, you should understand. Intelligence of the buddhi, buddhi matam ashmi, I am the intelligence of the intelligent. Tejas chejashvinamaham, I am the prowess of all powerful men. Balam balavatam chaham kamaraga vivajitam, I am the strength of the strong, devoid of passion and desire. Dhanama avidutta bhuteshu kamoshmi bharatashabha, I am sex life which is not contrary to religious principles, O Lord of the Bharatas Arjuna. Ye chaiva satvika bhava rajashastamasaschaye mata eviti tanvidi na tvaham te shute mai. Know that all states of being, be they of goodness, passion or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am in one sense everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of material nature, for they, on the contrary, are within me. This will be explained in more detail in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna goes on in further detail to elaborately explain his Jogam Aishwaryam. All manifestations are resting on him, however he is not part of the material manifestation. That will be further explained in verses 4 to 11 of the 9th chapter. Prabhupada's commenting on these verses. Even if you are not inclined to chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, then try to understand Krishna in this way. Either you drink milk, or even you drink wine, so you have got some taste in any liquid thing while drinking. So Krishna says, Rasoham apsu kuntaya, my dear Kuntaya, Arjuna, that taste in the liquid thing which you drink or use, that is I am. Just see how it is easily can be done. Nobody is without drinking something liquid, either Coca-Cola or water or this or that. Something must be drinking. So Krishna says, I am that taste. So where is the difficulty of understanding Krishna? Krishna explains in verse number 7, Mayi sarvamidam, everything rests upon me, everything is me. However, when we're interacting with this material world, we do not recognize Krishna. In fact, we cannot see Krishna. That's because he covers himself. Krishna covers his personality by the manifested material energy, as he explains in text number 13. Tribhir gunamayi bhavai ebi shadramidam jagat mohitam nabijanati mam ebyam paramabhyam. That mohitam nabijanati, deluded by the three modes, Tribhir guna mayi bhavai ebi shadramidam jagat, the entire universe, the whole world does not know me. Nabijanati mam ebya padam abhyayam, because I am above these modes and inexhaustible. Mam ebya padam abhyayam, because Krishna is not a product of the three modes of material nature. He's beyond the three modes of material nature. Therefore, those who are conditioned by the three modes of material nature cannot recognize his presence everywhere. However, Krishna goes on to explain in the next verse, Devyeshu gunamayi mamamaya duradhyaya. It's very difficult to overcome this bewildering mohitam, bewildering potency of the material energy. The material energy bewilders us in such a way that we completely forget God. And there is a class in humanity of the sworn atheists who are even convinced that God doesn't exist. This is mamamaya duradhyaya, how we can see the extent of the bewildering potency of the material nature, that the gross atheists are completely convinced that Krishna doesn't exist, that God doesn't exist. However, this bewildering fact, or this condition of bewilderment, can be addressed, it can be overcome by surrendering to Krishna. Mameve prapadante mayam etam taranti, mayam etam, this illusory potency, tarantite, it can be overcome, mameve prapadante. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains the concept of nitya-baddha, eternally conditioned, that the jiva, Prabhupada's explaining, is a living entity, belongs to the eternal superior nature of the Lord, but due to contamination by the inferior nature, matter, their illusion is also eternal. The conditioned soul is therefore called nitya-baddha, or eternally conditioned. No one can trace out the history of his becoming conditioned at a certain date in the material history. Later in the 9th chapter, also, bhutva paliyate, Krishna is explaining that again and again the conditioned soul appears in the material energy, tries to work in such a way to satisfy his material desires, and that may continue for bahut janma, for thousands and thousands of births in different species. And then at the end of the day of Lord Brahma, and subsequently again at the end of the life of Lord Brahma, the conditioned soul, again he merges into the body of Lord Vishnu, and it remains unmanifest for a period of time. And then again, when the universes are emanating from the pore holes of Lord Vishnu's body, again the living entity is placed in the womb of a mother in the material energy, and again this can go on endlessly until one is fortunate to come in contact with the devotee of the Lord and revive his Krishna consciousness. So nitya-baddha. And Prabhupada's also explaining how Devyesha gunamami, how is it that the material energy is described here as Daivi. Prabhupada's explaining divine, this divine energy of mind. In the purport, Prabhupada explains that the inferior material nature is defined herein as divine nature, due to its divine connection with the movement of the divine will. Being conducted by divine will, material nature, although inferior, acts so wonderfully in the construction and destruction of the cosmic manifestation. Mayam tu prakritim vidan mayanam tu maheshwaram. Although Maya, illusion, is false or temporary, the background of Maya is the supreme magician, the supreme personality of Godhead, who is Maheshwara, the supreme controller. In the Brahma Samhita, it is a nice analogy is given, Chayeva Yasha Bhuvanani Vibhati Durga, that this material energy is like a shadow of the supreme personality of Godhead. So the shadow actually, it appears to resemble the original form in its shape, in its design. However, it is intrinsically different. If we were to ask the ladies to marry the shadow of their husband, they probably wouldn't be inclined to do that, because you won't find any paisa in the pockets of the shadow. We want the real thing. However, and you're all laughing, saying, Prabhu, amra otta bokane, Prabhu, we are not so foolish, but actually we've come to this material world, and we accept it as real. Asatera satta korimani, as Narottam Das Thakur sings, that temporary things, illusory things, we are considering so important. Prahlad Maharaj also in his prayers, in his teachings to his schoolmates, is explaining Natei vidu swatagatam hi Vishnu durashayai bahir arta manina. They're considering manina, they think, their opinion is, their perception is that bahir arta, the external energy, is very important. Here we are sitting at Sri Rashbi Hari Mandir, ISKCON Juhu, and in the gardens, and it's a very nice, peaceful environment here. We're discussing Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Jota, as it is. However, outside we can hear the traffic and the people. They're very much engrossed. They're very much absorbed in meeting the demands of their daily obligations, and this is very important, and this is the priority of their life. If they are interested in spiritual life, it's definitely not a priority. Occasionally they may do some puja, some prayer, but the real serious thing in life is making progress in the material life. When we were young devotees, we were preaching in Australia, doing Sankirtan, and regularly the materialists would see the devotees performing Sankirtan, and they would call out, "Get real! Get real, man! Get real!" But actually, devotional life is reality. Devotional life is the real reality, because by practicing devotional service, we are situating ourselves in our eternal constitutional position as Krishna's servant, and we're serving Krishna for Krishna's pleasure alone. That is who we are. That is Jivara Swarupa Nitya Krishna Das, and therefore by engaging in the service of Lord Krishna, we are in the real life. Rupa Goswami also explains that Nikalashvapi avashtashu, in whatever material circumstances we may find ourselves in, Iha Yasha Hare Dasha Kamana Manasa Gira. If one is Hare Das, serving Lord Krishna, Karmana with his activity, Manasa with his mind, Gira with his words, Jivan Mukta, Sauchite, he's considered a liberated soul. He's functioning in his eternal constitutional position, which is the actual reality. Mameveya prapadante maya metam charantite. Prabhupada in the purport explains how Krishna delivers the conditioned soul from the illusion of the material energy, this divine energy, by the process of surrender unto him. Prabhupada gives a very exquisite analogy which is very significant. Krishna, being the Lord of the illusory energy, can order the insurmountable energy to release the conditioned soul. He orders this release out of his causeless mercy on the surrendered soul, and out of his paternal affection for the living entity, who is originally a beloved son of the Lord. Just imagine, Prabhupada's, although in the verse Krishna doesn't give any hint to relationship of paternality with the living entity, but Prabhupada shares that with us in his purport, that this is Prabhupada sharing that, where Krishna is saying, Mameveya prapadyante, maya metam charantite. You surrender unto me, you can overcome the influence of the material energy. And in meditating on this statement of Krishna, Prabhupada reflecting a very deep understanding and realization, in Rasa Tattva, in his teachings to Rupa Goswami, Mahaprabhu explains that the living entity can assume the mood of a parent of Krishna. That's called Vatsalya Ras. So, technically speaking, it's not that Krishna has a relationship, a parental relationship, but Prabhupada is using that example to explain to us, to help us understand the merciful nature of the Lord, just like a parent is very merciful to a child. We can see in conditional life that for the child, the parent gives everything. The parent gives their whole life. The parent, for themselves, is satisfied with very little. But the affection and the attention and the energy that is spent on protecting, on nourishing, on helping to grow and develop the child, that all the parents' energy goes into that. So it's a very deep and affectionate relationship, a very a strong emotional connection. So Prabhupada's using that analogy to help us understand the merciful nature and the merciful inclination that Krishna has to all his parts and parcels, as he explains later in Bhagavad Gita, that Aham bija pradapita, I am the seed-giving father of all living entities, and Mamai Vangsha, Jivaloka, we are part of Krishna, just like the parent and the child have a direct biological relationship. And there's a very natural sense of affection and love for the child just because of the biological relationship. It's very natural. It's very strong. And so Prabhupada's explaining that Krishna is inclined to show mercy upon living entity, just like a parent is very much inclined to be affectionate and show mercy upon a child. Therefore, surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord is the only means to get free from the clutches of the stringent material nature. Prabhupada concludes, jurisdiction of Krishna consciousness extends everywhere, and one who knows Krishna consciousness is blessed. Those who do not know Krishna are in illusion, and so knowledge of Krishna is liberation, and ignorance of him is bondage. Srila Prabhupada ki. In this lesson, Srila Prabhupada described the significance of the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, how they are protected by the first 6 chapters Karma Yoga, by the last 6 chapters Gyan, and the confidential subjects of Bhagavad Bhakti are explained in this middle portion of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is beginning to instruct Arjuna in the science of Bhagavad Bhakti, on the essential item, and the first and essential item being hearing about him, and Krishna is facilitating the hearing about him by instructing Arjuna directly in the transcendental science of Krishna consciousness.